welcome everybody. This is again our inaugural virtual conference for 2020, and we're excited to have everybody here with us today. Today you're going to learn practices in continuous improvement, sales and marketing, and developing high performance teams, and lots of other things that we'll be doing on how to grow your business, increase your profits, and during what has become known as the COVID pandemic. But I want to welcome everybody here today. And first off, I think everybody's muted. Go ahead and use the chat feature throughout the day if you have questions or things you want to ask us. Ask your presenter or speaker. We'll be monitoring the chat room, and we'll open those things up. I wanted to start, first off by acknowledging our sponsors today, and event sponsors for the conference are Now CFO and the Boeing Corporation. Appreciate them stepping up and being big sponsors of this event. Certainly our sponsors allow us to do a lot of things and be able to put this conference on. So thanks to them. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that today is Veterans Day. Maybe just a quick background. The origin of Veterans Day, for those of you that may not know, traces back to World War I. And in fact, as I was driving in this morning, they were sounding the bells in London for the remembrance of the armistice in Germany, which happened on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. And so that's what we honor when we do Veterans Day, not to be confused with Memorial Day. Memorial Day is honors those who died in military service, and Veterans Day honors those both living and dead. So on this Veterans Day, I wanted to take just a second and honor my grandfather, who went into Omaha Beach 2 days after D-Day, and who never spoke to me about that throughout his life. And I tried to get him on his deathbed with dementia. He relayed stories to me of D-Day, and I just wanted to on this day remember him and honor him as a veteran who served diligently. Thanks to all those veterans who protect our freedoms and who serve valiantly and diligently. So thank you. And if you have an opportunity today, thank a veteran. Thank them for what they've done for us and the service that they've given. So let's get started. We're pleased today to have a fabulous keynote speaker with us. Mr. Don Rheem is with us. I saw Don last year at a presentation in Saratoga Springs, New York, and Don presented to myself and my colleagues there that presented on a topic of emotional Velcro. In fact, we'll put Don's headshot up here so everybody can see what we've got there, but having a slight technical difficulty.
Yeah, we had a little bit of an echo there. Here we go. Problem solved.
Great. Okay. Got the problem solved. So let's go to the next slide if we can move that slide forward, and there we go. So Don, I appreciate you being here with us. Don he's the CEO of E3 Solutions, and they're a provider of employee workplace metrics, which allows organizations to build and engage high-performance cultures. Don focuses on using science-backed research to consult with leaders at all levels within his organization. I heard Don speak, as I indicated, in New York last year, and he gave a presentation that talked about emotional Velcro, and that phrase has stuck with me ever since. Brought it back here, and we've used it with our team here at UMA, and I'm really excited to hear Don again. He comes from a manufacturing background, understands manufacturing companies, and understands what it takes to create a culture and an emotional Velcro that keeps those employees from in talent retention, to keep them in your companies and work. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the time over to Mr. Don Rheem. Don, welcome.
Great. Thank you very much. And welcome everybody. Thank you for being here with us this morning. I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share just to get to my slides. Let's make sure this all works correctly. And hopefully you can all now just see my title slide there, and that's
Yes, we can.
all good. Excellent. It is true. I do come from a manufacturing background. Some of you might have Rheem water heaters or air conditioners in your homes, or GE Rudd the Home Depot brand are all made by Rheem. My grandfather was the founder of Rheem. And I've learned a lot in that experience growing up in that family. Now, it's no longer in the family, but it's certainly still in our genes. So what I am combining, is that my background is not in business. I'm not trained as I didn't get an MBA or anything like that. I'm trained as a biologist and ecologist. And I see companies as social ecosystems because they are. And all I'm trying to do is to create a healthy ecosystem. And the good news is we know exactly what that looks like. That is, advances in the neurosciences have literally helped us map out the conditions where Homo sapiens operate at their best, where they thrive. And that's what I want to focus on in our short time here this morning. So what I would like you to do, please, if you would just hold up one hand, just hold up one hand. Okay, I'm looking for it on my gallery view. This is where I find out if you're watching or doing emails. Okay, this is great. Now, put your thumb across your palm, and wrap your 4 fingers over your thumb. This is a crude representation of the human brain. The 4 fingers represent your prefrontal cortex. That's where you do all your thinking and analysis. What's the thumb underneath here? Well, the thumb is in what's called the midbrain. And it represents what is labeled as the limbic system. And the limbic system is the epicenter of fight, flight, or freeze in us. So, and it also is the emotional processing center in the brain. So emotion, threat detection, intellect, problem solving. Now, which part of the brain do you think has what's called control precedence? Which part of the brain gets to run the show if it wants to? And it's the thumb. It's the role of emotion. But, and the threat detection is really important because if it triggers threat, it starts hijacking resources from the rest of the brain. Now, this image represents employees. 70% of employees coming to work today report being disengaged. So for them, the environment they're in and their limbic system is registering as this isn't a great place to be. And when that happens, they clearly underfunction. Let me show you just a quick view of what this looks like in the brain. So the prefrontal cortex, that's where we do our thinking and analysis. The limbic system, again, fight, flight, or freeze. And it actually is in that order. And this threat detection system is really important for us in the workplace. And I'll talk more about that in our short time together. But for centuries, we've been talking to employees' prefrontal cortex, when in fact, what we now know is the part of the brain that determines what we do during the day is the limbic system. So one of the things we try to help managers and leaders do is understand how to talk directly to the limbic system because it has, again, what's called control precedence. And in fact, just to give you a sense of this, we have a very unique definition of culture. There are lots of definitions of culture out there. You go to Wikipedia or just Google it, but here's our definition of culture. If you want to know what your culture is, all you have to do is answer this question. What does it feel like to work here? What does it feel like to work here? And the answer to that question is your true culture, because the way people feel determines how they behave. A decade ago, 15 years ago, in previous, I would have said the way people think determines how they behave. But what we now know without any ambiguity is that emotion drives behavior. And that is the epicenter of behavioral shift and change. So that's part of what we want to do. Now, we are at our core herd animals. We are hardwired at birth to work together. This is just one of the key understandings about Homo sapiens and understanding what drives our behavior. At birth, in the human genome, we have a directive to get in a group and to stay in a group. And this is important for us at work because we don't grow up in tight-knit tribes today. Well, okay, Packers fans, but that's an anomaly. But most of us don't grow up in tight-knit tribes today. But where do we spend most of our work, most of our time when we're awake with other adults? It's at work. And work literally is the new tribe for the 21st century Homo sapien. So a part of us is actually hardwired to go and to be there. The challenge is what we find when we get there are not what the brain expected. Now, why are we herd animals? So, I mean, I get it. It makes sense. And the evidence all points to that. But the question is why? So I want to take you on a little journey. And so we're just really quick going to go halfway around the planet. We're going to go to East Africa. This is a picture of the Serengeti, hundreds and hundreds of acres of grasslands that just go on for as far as the eye can see. And I want to introduce you to one of the most prolific mammals in the Serengeti. You may not have seen this mammal before. It's not in the tourist brochures because it's so ugly. It's just studied ugly. But here it is. I want to introduce you to the wildebeest. Now, it's the largest mobile protein source on the Serengeti. Why am I introducing you to wildebeests? To make a key point. If you're a wildebeest, where are your greatest chances of survival? Alone, out on your own, searching for a new watering hole or greener grass, or tucked inside the herd? Where are they? Where are your chances of success go way, way up? Clearly inside the herd. But it wasn't just true for wildebeest. It was also true for us. All you had to do on any given day is outrun one person and you lived another day. Now, this condition for us, that is of being in the group and how it was really the ultimate source of survival and security. But these conditions for us as Homo sapiens were so consistent for so long. And it doesn't matter to me when you think we began, but from that point forward, the leading indicator of success and survival was the ability to get into and stay in a group. And so neuroscientists tell us today that every fold of our cerebral matter, every corner of our brain is dedicated to being in a group. Let me state this a different way. We are hardwired to have what is referred to as safe and secure connections at birth. Again, it's in the genome. Not only do we share 99.9% of our DNA with each other, all Homo sapiens on the planet share this common origin and agenda in the brain. Get in a group and stay there. What's the predominant group for Homo sapiens in the 21st century? The workplace. Here's a quote from the Oxford Handbook of Neuroscience. Humans are fundamentally a social species whose social environment shaped our genes, brains, and bodies, and our biology has fundamentally shaped the social environment we have created. Now, stated more succinctly by a brilliant neuroscientist at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, the dominant ecology for the human being is other human beings. So this is important to us, not just to be in a group. And some of you may agree, yes, of course we want to be in a group. We have a tribe on our political party, the church we go to. It might be the source of sports attire we like to wear. Are we Nike? Are we Under Armour? But we all want to be a part of something. But it's more than that. What it means at a neurological level, at a brain-based level, is we now know that Homo sapiens can only operate at their full capacity if they can do so with others. And not just any others, what we might call trusted others. The neuroscientists refer to it as reliable social connections. It's just people we can trust. And when that happens, we actually can thrive. What we're looking for is an environment where people look forward to coming to work and the people that they work with. So what do I want to touch on today? Just in our short time, I want to talk a little bit about our labor history, about how we got to this condition where employees, the vast majority of employees are disengaged when they get to work. I want to talk about the specific impacts on the two newest generations to the workforce, and then just a little bit more on neuroscience to give us a better understanding of for what it is we need to do going forward. So going back to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, somewhere outside of Newark, New Jersey. In the Industrial Revolution, it was all about production, and then we developed this assembly line, and people came to work and they did routine jobs, and it was generally employees. There was a lot of them, and if they didn't work out and couldn't cut it, you would just let them go. And from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution until today, with a little bit of blip in the pandemic and a couple other blips, there has been an abundance of labor. No, these aren't people waiting to vote. These are people standing in line, hoping that someone on that job site is going to come in sick or underperform, and they can be put right back in again. Now, I know we may not think labor availability is a big issue again. I mean, after the pandemic started, within 30 days, 45 days, unemployment went up to 22 million people. It's now dropped to below 11. It's less than half that. Our unemployment rate now is somewhere around 6.5%. Before the pandemic, it was in the low threes, the lowest unemployment rate since the Vietnam War. So it may feel like there are more people not working right now, but in terms of skills and skilled labor and specific jobs and job titles, they're just as scarce as they've ever been. And so in this period from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution until today, leaders, owners of companies didn't really have to worry much about the conditions that people worked in because they wanted to come to work. They needed to come to work for a paycheck. But what we're going to find going forward is that employees today have more and more choice than they've ever had before. So the quality of our culture, of what it's like when people get to work, is more important now than it's ever been, and it's just going to get more important over time. The old model of leadership and management, top-down, hierarchical, punitive, will not work going forward. It's not enough. It's insufficient. And I'll talk about a couple of reasons why in this very next section. We need to come up with new ways to lead that aren't punitive or threatening, or people are threatened. Because you threaten people today, maybe not exactly today, but in 6, 9, 12 months, certainly in 18 months, many of them will just walk because they don't need to work in that environment anymore. So just a little bit of our labor history. We've never had to focus on the people. You know, we use science in almost everything we do in business today. Just in time, inventory. We've used lean. We've done Six Sigma. We use it in our financials. But when it comes to what drives human behavior, when it comes to an understanding of what drives human behavior at a fundamental level, most organizations are about 2 decades behind the science. It is the last untapped resource for science to change outcomes inside organizations. The difference between an organization that has high levels of engagement and ones that have low, one of the metrics is productivity. And the high performance culture where people look forward to coming to work, up to 40% more productive than the similar company, but has low levels of engagement. So a new and a different view on labor is going to be needed. And this is really hard, especially for some boomers and even some of the older Gen Xers, to get their head around this, because that's not the environment they grew up in. So I also want to talk about the 2 new generations, and then I'm going to get to neuroscience. So millennials, anyone from who's like 24, 25 to 38 years of age is a millennial. Yep, they're getting older. Millennials have been particularly hard hit in this pandemic. They got hammered when they started their career because a lot of them, it was in a recession. They were just starting to get economic traction, and then this happened. They're the generation least likely to have real estate or savings, and so they've pretty much been hammered. The other generation, the Gen Z, anyone who's 24 and younger, it's been even more brutal for them. Many of them, a vast majority of them, are more likely to be in the retail trades or in the food service or business, and they've just been hammered. And they'll be the last to sort of catch up in terms of the labor availability, but we need to. And we also need to create an environment that they want to work in. Now, Gen Z is a little different than millennials, the generation before them. We don't quite know enough about them in the workplace. One of the things we do know is they seem to be more focused on money than millennials, who are more focused on meaning and purpose in their life. So for managers, the point I want to make is there are really four current generations in the workplace: Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, and boomers. And the more managers can attune their leadership style to these different generations, the more effective they'll be. You don't have to do a lot to shift, but you just have to understand that the reason they're in generations is because they have, as a rule, different things that they're looking for, and certainly out of work. This is what the conclusion that I write about in the book that I wrote for Forbes on this, and that is that the future of work will be defined more by how it feels than how it pays. The future of work will be defined more by how it feels than how it pays. What do I mean by that? In an environment that we were in just before the pandemic, and we will be in again, certainly probably within 12 months, is a labor shortfall where we're just starving for talent. There might be some people still unemployed, but they don't have the skills to do what we want to do. And just before the pandemic started, for the first time in our history, our economic history, there were more there were more unfilled jobs in America. There was about 7.3 million in February. There were more unfilled jobs than there were unemployed people to fill them. And we're going to move back into that environment. So what does this mean? It means eventually employees will have lots of choices of where to work, because lots of people will be hiring, and salaries are also going to go up. So what's the differentiator between one employee and another? And this is the point that was made when I was introduced. this concept of emotional Velcro. And this is just to put a nice sort of little story behind this. I'm not a big storyteller, but I'm with a client, a construction company. We have a number of construction companies as clients at E3 Solutions because this labor issue is so important for them. Anyway, I'm doing our boot camp on employee engagement for the managers of this construction company out west. And the CEO comes in before it starts and he says, Don, can you talk with me for a minute? And I said, sure. And he said, walk with me. And I'm following him down the hall toward his office. And he says, I want you to know why you're here today. And I said, well, I'm here to do the boot camp. And he said, no, that's what you're doing. I want you to know why. Takes me into his office, goes to the conference table in his office, points to a map to an intersection, and he says, we're building our marquee project, the biggest thing we've ever built, right at this intersection. And I'm nodding. And he said, we have a competitor who's building another project right across the street, also really big. And I'm nodding. And he looks up at me and said, you're here because I need to figure out, how do I keep my people from walking across the street for 25 cents an hour more? Because they are. So the only way to prevent people reliably, sustainably, using science to hold people to an employer when they could literally get 25, 50 cents, $1 more an hour somewhere else, is to have what we refer to as emotional Velcro. The hooks and loops that would hold someone to an organization, even if they could get a utility benefit of getting 25, 50 or whatever more somewhere else. And that's the key to employee engagement, is to identifying these hooks and loops that drive that kind of behavior. And that's what we show our clients how to do. And that's what I'm going to talk about with you a little bit this morning. But in this environment, it's, again, how does it feel to work here? Because if I could work anywhere, where am I going to choose? And what this construction company has found, and this was 3 years ago that conversation happened, is that they still do lose some people to these other competitors that are just desperate and offer their employees more money. But the head of HR told me, she said, but in about 40% of the cases, something interesting happens within 3 months. Imagine what it is. About 4 out of 10 of these employees call and ask if they can come back, because they said, when I worked for you, it felt like family. I felt I was known, I was an entity. But over at this other place, I'm just a hammer on a belt. And that's not what they want. So the labor context has changed. We have 2 new generations in the workplace that are looking for other things other than just a paycheck, and certainly don't want to be led by that old top-down hierarchical managerial style. But let's understand how neuroscience can help us here. And specifically, I'm going to talk about the role of relationships. So imagine this. Imagine that I come to work with 100 units of energy every day. That's how much metabolic capacity I bring when I come to work. But for the last 6 months, I've been working with another colleague in my company. And over the last 6 months, I've realized that this person is completely trustworthy. They have my back. They're consistent and predictable in the way they do their work. And so something happens to my brain. My limbic system says, you know what, Don? You don't just have your resources to get this work done. You also, and I'll use the word Mary. You also have Mary's resources because she's reliable, predictable. This kind of a relationship is what the neuroscientists refer to as a reliable social resource. And when my limbic system realizes that Mary is that, trustworthy, has my back, consistent and predictable, my limbic system says, Don, you've got more than what you had. So now I'm at 150 units of energy, quite literally. And if I'm the same thing for Mary, she's at 150. So this is a case of where 1 + 1 = 3. And what does this mean for the individual? It means they can do more work and it doesn't feel like more work. And the work they do feels better. It actually feels less like work. One of the ways we describe this is that employees come to work every day with discretionary effort. It's a level of effort that they can only volunteer to you. But when they do volunteer that discretionary effort, they're doing more, they're more productive, but they actually feel better about the experience. That's the fantastic thing about engagement, is employees are doing more, but it doesn't feel harder. It actually feels better. It's a win-win for both parties. So I now get to work with Mary, and we're both at 150, and we love coming to work because I get to load share with her. I don't have to solve problems on my own. But then imagine I come to work on a Monday morning and I discover that Mary has been moved to another division. I don't get to work with her anymore. Do I go back to 100 units of energy? Or is it lower? And the research is really clear. It goes lower. I'm going to plummet well below what I'm capable of because, and this is quite literally true, the work that I did without a second thought on Friday with Mary, on Monday morning, realizing she's gone, feels impossible to do. Now, I may do it and I'll start doing it because I have to, I work there, but it's going to feel harder. I'm going to be less happy about it. I'm not going to operate anywhere close to what my full capacity is. And this is the just the importance of having these safe and secure connections at work, just good, trusted relationships. That's what the brain expects to find in the tribe when it gets there. There's people it can load share with and that have our back. But that is not what most employees find when they get to work. And who's primarily responsible for that? Managers. I know there's a lot in the leadership literature about culture, and I appreciate it, and I really value the culture. But everyone's jumping on this culture, and I shouldn't call it a bandwagon, but just there's a lot of speakers talking about culture and how important it is, and it is. But this is how I'd like to explain it to you, so you get a better idea. So there's this culture writ large across your whole organization, and that's primarily the result of your history, your core values, and current leaders. But then in different departments or locations, there's a subculture, heavily influenced by the people running that department or division. But then under every manager, you have a microculture. And it's that microculture that has the biggest a role in how employees operate during the day. So you create this really cool culture at the enterprise level, fantastic, and you absolutely should. But if I come to work for you and I work for a toxic manager, your cool culture is meaningless to me. And in fact, what it's done is it's created even more cognitive dissonance between, well, that's what they say, but this is what I'm experiencing. 70% of the variance of how engaged an employee is, 70% of the variance is directly attributable to the employee's immediate manager or supervisor, 70. And we estimate that about another 10% is around feelings of fairness and processes and procedures and resources and tools. But at most, the role of culture writ large only impacts about 20% of people's daily behavior. It's a small bit player. Now, if all of the managers' microcultures were congruent with what you're trying to do at the top, then bam, yeah, totally. It has a huge impact. But it's this lack of congruence that is so important. And this is exactly why we measure engagement at E3 Solutions by manager. So our employee engagement survey is focused on those units, those pivot points that determine an employee's behavior. And by the way, when you think about survey tools, most of the tools that are out there are employee satisfaction surveys. They ask questions, how happy are you with this, that, or the other? We don't ask any satisfaction questions in our survey. There is a huge chasm between employee satisfaction and employee engagement. Satisfaction is an attitude. It's hard to satiate and it can change in a moment. Engagement is predictable and it's about a behavior. And so you want to make sure when you do measure engagement that you measure the right thing, if you will. So this is an interesting image. So these two employees, they're probably talking to each other, but this depicts something that has happened over the last 20, 30 years in America. Over the last 25 or so years, the number of Americans reporting to be pervasively alone and isolated in their life has doubled from 20% of the population to 40%. Now, this has been referred to by a former US Surgeon General as a pandemic of social isolation spreading across America. And this was before the pandemic. Imagine what the pandemic has done to individuals and employees who are more isolated than ever, especially working from home, separate from their regular team members. This is a mental health, public health issue, and we ignore it at our peril. So all of this, by the way, this social disaffection has happened at the very same time technology has allowed us to reach out and connect with each other more easily and more inexpensively than ever before. So the technology that has enabled us to reach out and connect, like social media, is leaving us still bereft of a sense of connection. You do not find, the brain does not find important social connections, reliable social connections online. It's just not where it happens. The brain does not deal well understanding relationships in a two-dimensional screen. So when we think of our locations, our manufacturing facilities, and lots of equipment, but bereft of humanity, it's a very lonely and isolating place. So how do we create these environments where people can have safe and secure connections? And we've got an approach that we advocate and has worked well, very well, at least for our clients. I will tell you, and I'm not here to sell E3 solutions. I really just want you to get an understanding of the science. But what I can tell you is that in the first year, this is that difference between engagement and satisfaction. But in the very first year, our average client increases employee engagement by 23% just in the first year. So how do we get there? And I'm sorry about these slides have moved around. The first thing you have to do is measure, because you can't manage what you don't measure. So if engagement feels important to you, figure out how to measure it. And there are lots of tools out there, but as I just said, don't pick one that's measuring satisfaction. I think it's a fool's errand. Now, then when you measure, you want to measure it by manager. That's absolutely essential. It's the only way to have actionable data. If you look at data about engagement in your company, but you can't pin it down to the units where it's determined, I think it's going to be slow going for you. But it's unfair to measure managers if you don't come back and train them. So how have we invested in our managers to train them? And most managers today are posers. That is, only about 1 out of 10 managers has the natural ability to lead other adults reflexively well. Another 2 out of 10 could do it with a little bit of encouragement. But this is Gallup research, by the way, and it's global. Gallup estimates that that 7 out of 10 of today's managers just don't have the natural ability to do it. But they have the title, they have the extra salary. See, we promote people into managerial positions, but we don't give them any new portfolio of skills. So I want to make sure you then come back and train. But training isn't enough in and of itself. Training does not change daily behavior as very effectively. It can, but in general, training inspires, it motivates, it reveals, but it doesn't necessarily change habits over time. That's where the reinforce part is so important, to reinforce the training, come back at it again and again and again. And there are all kinds of ways to do that, both in the way senior leaders give recognition and feedback to their managers. There are a lot of ways to do it. Obviously, I can't do in just 45 minutes with you here today. But again, when you measure, make sure you're measuring engagement, not satisfaction. The way we do the, and here's the, you have to be able to measure. This is what it looks like when you measure engagement. It looks like a bell curve or a histogram. And we simply divide the bell curve into these 4 categories. Over in the far left, you have the actively disengaged, then the somewhat disengaged, the engaged, and then the actively engaged. And the goal is to find out how many of my employees are in each of these 4 categories. And then over time, you want to move them to the right. And that's what I want to show you here. This is our just an example of a journey you could be on or you should be on. When you measure, you can see in year 1, the average company, only 45% of their employees were engaged, 55% were disengaged. And then every year engagement goes up when you follow just some of these simple steps that I'm talking about here. Not only does the engagement go up, but the proportion of those players that are what I would call A players, the actively engaged, goes up. And the actively engaged player, employee on the dark green on the right, is 3 times more productive than the actively disengaged employee in the dark red on the left. So there's also in this image of the bell curve, there's an enormous hemorrhaging of productivity on the left. The actively disengaged are typically giving you a half day's work for a full day's pay. Their productivity multiplier is 0.5. The somewhat disengaged are slightly more productive. Their multiplier is 0.66. So out of an 8-hour day, they're giving you 5 1/4 real work. The engaged, 1 for 1, that old saying, a decent day's work for a decent day's pay. Then the actively engaged, they're giving you 1.5 days work for 1 day's pay, a multiplier of 1.5. These shifting people to the right is absolutely essential. And then the one last thing I'll show you is this arrow that's going up from left to right. This is about the customer experience that then results in customer passion and loyalty, or customer engagement is the way we refer to it. The very same science that engages employees engages customers. And there's a relationship between the two. And it's one piece of research put it at 0.85. And what that means is it's almost a one-to-one relationship. So you improve employee engagement by 10%, customer engagement goes up 8.5. So you want to be on that kind of a journey. Now, this is a manager who has to work with the actively disengaged, or maybe it's just an A player on a team who has to work with these C and D players. It's really frustrating. I was at a teaching hospital with about 250 managers in the room, and I asked them the question using a wonderful platform called Mentimeter that then crowdsources their input. What does disengagement look like? And you can see in this hospital what just pops out. Negativity got the most votes. And then apathy and gossip. But what's around the periphery here is just really, really interesting. Passive, manipulative, problem maker, disempowered, ambivalent, sabotage, makes excuses, only focuses on the negatives, disrespectful, unhappy, lazy, blah, sick, mean, toxic. It just goes on and on and on. These behaviors that are being done by the C and D players have a huge impact inside an organization. And it's not just about morale, it's about hard costs, because these behaviors increase turnover. People are sicker. They're more likely to have to take sick leave when they work in an environment where this is going on. And you're gonna have a higher accident rate. When engagement goes up, so does productivity, profitability, retention, and the customer experience all go up. Some things go down: sick leave, absenteeism, the accident rate. So this employee engagement literally is a rising tide that lifts all boats. So if you haven't focused on this significantly in your organization, you have a huge opportunity to do it, because this is what we want folks doing, and what we want it to look and to feel like when people get to work. These folks look forward to getting to work, and that when you do, we're much more likely to volunteer discretionary effort. Okay, I want to dive down in this equipping leaders, the training part. And what I want to do is give you some very practical. I don't want to just do theoretical. So I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna define 3 terms that I would love for you to write down and then implement with your managers. Validate is the first one. So here's the definition of validation. Now, why am I defining these 3 things? What we have found is that when managers view, it's going to be validate, recognize, and then feedback. And when managers see unique strategic value in each one, they do them more effectively and more frequently. So definition of validation: unconditional. Unconditional. That means we are validating people whether they're A, B, C, or D players. And you may think, why would I validate C and D? Because if we want to turn them around, if we want Ds to become Cs and Cs to become Bs, which they can and do, validation is the most fundamental act of one human being recognizing another. It's good morning, how are you? How's it going? How was your weekend? It does not include thank you, because that's conditional. So what is the frequency for doing validation? Daily. So we want managers, it's essentially, so validation, unconditional, and then in quotation marks, write this: I see you. I see you. And that's the point of validation. Every human being wakes up on the planet hardwired to be validated, to be seen and valued. And so this is the building block of creating a high performance culture. And it should be done daily. Now, write down the word recognition. Definition: conditional. We're not going to give out any trophies for losing here. Conditional, comma, slice it thinner. I'll explain that in a second. And then positive, and now the cadence, weekly. So they have to have done something to deserve it. Now, what's with the term slice it thinner? The typical descriptors of behavior that gets recognition are above and beyond, exceeded expectations, went the extra mile. And all of those are great. I've got no argument with those. But that bar is so high that employees can't clear it regularly. So I want managers slicing recognition thinner. I want them to look for smaller increments of discretionary effort and just comment on it. When you regularly comment on virtuous behavior, you get more of it. Employees are more likely to do that again. And that's the key. Now, feedback. This one's a little bit more detailed. So, I'm sorry, and recognition is weekly. So I expect every manager once a week to be able to find something that they can talk to their direct reports about. That's based on an average of no more than 10 direct reports. Definition of feedback: a confidential, one-on-one, supportive conversation about a confidential, one-on-one, supportive conversation about 1, 2, 3, and 4. Number 1, their job performance. That's nothing new there. Number 2, their behavior. Number 3, their attitude. Now, a lot of HR folks say you can't do that. You can't talk to people about their behaviors and attitudes. If it's not in their job description, you have no right to evaluate it. And certainly attitude is too subjective to hold people accountable to. And I understand the part about it being somewhat subjective. Have you ever had someone say, that's not my job, or that's not my job description? Here's the reply. Here's what I want you to do. And I want you to show your managers how to do this. The employee comes in and says, look, there's nothing in my job description that says I have to show up all cheery and supportive of others. And it's not in their job description. So what do you say? Actually, Don, it is a part of your job. One of our core values is fill in the blank. Integrity, mutual respect, whatever it is for you. One of our core values is integrity. And the way you behaved in that meeting lacked integrity. So we do need to talk about this. I want you to use your core values as cornerstones of accountability for behavior and attitude. It also will make your core values much more valuable to your managers. In our sessions, when I ask managers in our workshops, when I'm doing with multiple companies, and I ask managers to write down the core values of the company, they all look left and right, and then they go for their phones trying to figure it out. Why is that? Because your core values have no utility to them. If they had utility, they'd know them because they'd be using them, but they don't typically. So this is how we can make our core values really useful to managers. And now they want to know them because it helps them hold people accountable. That's the part. Sorry, I should have switched to feedback. So what's number 4 on feedback? They have to ask for feedback about themselves. They have to ask for feedback about themselves. True feedback is bi-directional. And so we need to train our managers to ask, how am I doing? You need to emerge into that gently, because the first time they do that, their team will freak out and think it's a trap. Now, step 3 is to reinforce. I just want to show you how we do it. You, of course, can find your own path, but we have a learning platform called ManagerResourceCenter.com. And on that ManagerResourceCenter.com, the managers can go there to get foundational. The foundation in the upper left is about what drives behavior, insights on team dynamics. Lifelong leadership is about them and preventing burnout. Custom guidance, they can ask us for help when they're having a challenges, and we respond within 48 hours. There's a toolkit. So think about, so if I'm going to train my managers, but I really need to give them something more regular. And then what we do for them is every Tuesday, we send out an email called Take 10 Tuesday. Why Tuesday? Because that has the highest open rate for non-essential emails. But we ask them to take 10 minutes out of the week to focus on their role as a leader. And every month is themed. The theme this month is team morale. So yesterday, all of the managers in the Manager Resource Center all got an email with 2 quick little micro learnings about team dynamics and how to do it. But whatever tool you use, just make sure your managers have it available. Now, for you, there's one other thing. For some of you that haven't, I apologize, that haven't measured engagement yet, and you think, wow, this is way too expensive. We have just come out with a tool that's a single work group tool, very inexpensive, and we've already been talking to your association about doing this, and we've just priced it so low that anybody can do it. So I don't want you to feel like a cost should impede you from being able to measure and to move forward. Also, I want you to know lots of resources for you at this address, keynote.e3solutions.com. We have additional resources there, including a link to my TEDx talk that I actually did in Utah at BYU on this issue of connection. And so go to YouTube, or you can go to this link and look it up, and you'll see the Stephen Covey stage, which was a great place to give a TED talk. I was just thrilled to be able to do it there. Also, there's a podcast. So some of you listen to podcasts and want to get more about this role of science and management. These are all free. Wherever you get your podcasts, just search for Thrive by Design, or go to donrheem.com, which is the site that Forbes put together when they published the book. And then if you like to read and write notes and think about sharing something with managers, there's always the book itself. And you can also get linked in with me. If you want to just follow us and know what we do, I want you to know we're horrible marketers. So you won't be deluged with emails from us. This is about learning, growing, and taking your whole leadership approach for us to the next level. And we do this, and I'm going to close with this and then open it up for some questions. We do this. When we do it, we know that your productivity goes up, retention goes up, all of these wonderful things happen inside our client companies. And that's great, but that's not actually why we do it. The reason we do what we do is that we know if we can help you create a workplace that your employees look forward to coming to work in, and they thrive when they get there, that they will go home as better parents and better partners. Because if things are toxic at work, that goes home with them. And our families and our communities need lots of help. And for a third of employed Americans, one of the safest places they identify in their life is at work. So work is already a safe haven for them, and a place where they're finding these conditions that the brain has been searching for every day since birth. And so with that, I'll just close and open it up for any questions and turn it back over to my very generous hosts.
We are, thanks, Don. We're pleased to have you here today. And I would just echo Thrive by Design, fabulous book. Take the time to go listen to the podcast or download the book or get in contact with Don to have him come do some stuff for you, because he's done some amazing things. We're excited for an ongoing partnership with Don that we're going to be working on, doing a few more webinars throughout the next year and having him in as a guest to do more things. So we've got some questions out there, and let's start.
So hold on one second. We get this first one up from you right there.
So the first one, Don, is from Shelby at Power Blanket. It says, thoroughly enjoyed the conversation this morning. My question is related to your message on culture, specifically the difference between satisfaction and feeling. Do you have any advice for a company that may want to transition from one to the other, and potentially effective ways to establish that baseline?
Yeah, it's really tough because, the satisfaction surveys typically drive us to offer more benefits or perks. And the challenge is today's perk is tomorrow's entitlement. It doesn't have a lasting impact on sustainable engagement into the future any more than giving people raises does. So we need to look for these hardwired drivers that are in us, and they do relate to things like core values, and service, the meaning and purpose behind what we do. So the emotional Velcro comes with, what am I accomplishing by working for this company? And that feels good. What are we doing for the community? What are we doing for our customers and our clients? And so identifying what we refer to as a cathedral narrative is really, really important. And that is simply quick. I'm walking on a construction site. I come up to a mason and say, what are you doing? He says, I'm laying brick. I keep walking. I come across a second mason and say, hey, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm building a wall 8 feet high down here, 100 feet. Great. Come to a third mason and say, what are you doing? He says, I'm building a cathedral. And the question for us and for many of our manufacturing clients is, are our employees bricklayers or are they cathedral builders? And so we want to have this cathedral narrative is a key part of it. What we know is that when employees are engaged, they're satisfied, they're happy. So satisfaction and happiness, well, there's a lot in the literature now about happiness. It's an outcome. It's not the entry point. It's not the entrance you walk through trying to make people happy. You get them engaged and they're happy as a result. That's the right direction to go in. It's really hard to continuously satiate people's desire to be happy when you're doing it with things and benefits and perks.
Let's go down one more. Don, do core values align with and develop through branding, or what's the best way to develop those core values and develop that?
Well, when we work in organizations that don't have them, it needs to be an iterative process that involves the employees. And we use, I'm not, again, trying to sell this, but just giving as an example, the one workshop we have for employees, we call an Extraordinary Workplace Summit. And it's just the employees, no managers in the room. And we essentially ask them, where do you want to work? Not with another company, but what do you want the workplace to look like? You have to make it aspirational. So you say 3 years from now, if you came to work here, what would you want it to look like? And you identify the conditions that they want. And they're not all selfish. They're not all paid more. You really start to learn the kind of conditions that they want to work in. And they say things like, literally, a place where people smile more. I know more people. I have an understanding of where the company's going. I know where I fit in. These are not things and baubles. This is about communication and identifying purpose. And again, I'm all for benefits and perks. I do perks too with my employees, but they're all related to our core values.
Great stuff. Thanks, Don. Next question we've got here. Does engagement survey have standard questions regardless of company size?
Yes, it's the same. Our survey has 28 questions, and they don't deviate according to company size, because the part of the brain that determines what people do during the day has no idea how big the company is or what the industry is. The limbic system doesn't know its age, its skin color, its collar color, its education, its culture, or its ethnicity, or even its gender. It just knows whether or not it feels safe. So our questions are all designed to tease out conditions that we know the limbic system is looking for in order to thrive.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
Awesome. We have a question here from Chris Badger. What is the best way to engage and motivate boomers versus millennials?
Wow. So that's a big gap, because it's boomers and then Gen X and millennials. What's interesting is the boomers are now coming into closer alignment with millennials. That is, millennials have always been very focused on meaning and purpose in their life, and that's what they want. What we're discovering with boomers, certainly when they go into their echo careers, which is the second career after they retire, are looking for the very same thing. So they're now going to work in nonprofits and AmeriCorps. They want to make a difference. They want to find meaning and purpose in their life. But from the old school boomer who came up in this labor history of everything is top down, hierarchical, and punitive, that leadership style is just antithetical to a millennial. It just doesn't make sense. It's unnecessary, and millennials bristle against it, and they don't want to work for that kind of a manager. And again, when 70% of the wobble on engagement is attributable to a manager, you as a business owner want to be really attuned to how your managers are leading, and especially how they hold people accountable.
Want to take the next one, Ryan?
Great points. Love it. Yeah, a comment from our friend Alex Dobsky says, well done. Then Devin Hyatt says this. He says, this subject is close to my heart, and any advice on ramping up brand new managers to be leaders? Great question.
Yeah. Look, I want to interject just one thing. We are now into our second decade of thousands of books on leadership. There are more than 1,000 in print today, but 2 decades of tome after tome on leadership and how to do it and how to be it. And yet the number of employees reporting to be engaged when they go to work has barely budged. All of this leadership literature has not changed the nature of work, and it's not making work more engaging. It might be personally satisfying and inspiring to you, but it's not changing what needs to be changed. So, and very few of those books are based on science. There's some data in them, but that's not science. It's just data. So let's look at what neuroscience now tells us the brain needs to thrive, and just build our culture and our management approach on that, because it works every time. It's far more effective and gets a lot more done, and you'll move the needle.
Okay. All right. I think we're ready to wrap it up, Todd, and we'll move on to the next section.
Don, again, thank you
Great.
so much. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation last year, and even more so learned more today. So if anybody out there that's listening, we certainly got a lot of contact information for Don. I would highly encourage you reach out to him at E3 Solutions, have him come in and do some training for you and your company. He understands this from a science perspective, and the engagement side around culture, and just fabulous information. Something we've talked about with many conferences over the last number of years is how do you create this emotional velcro? What is the differences between millennials and Gen X and baby boomers? And my kids like to use phrases like, okay, boomer, to me, and I keep reminding them that I am not a boomer, but
They're one generation off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In their minds, I am. But Don, again, thank you so much for being here with us. Thanks for your great presentation. We look forward to working with you in the future even more.
Great. Thank you, guys. I look forward to meeting all of you at some point. I wish we could have done this together. It would have been even more fun.
Yeah.
Amen.
Brain check. Let's do it.
Okay.
Do it for sure. Great.
All right, you guys.